Hi everyone, this is Arpad from StarPath Academy, and this is part 2 of the video of analysis of hyperinflation interview with Ali from Lebanon. So I had a 5-part series of interviews with Ali, who is living in Lebanon under hyperinflation, and I myself experienced hyperinflation in the 90s in Romania as a very young person. And ever since that, I studied hyperinflation or in the economy and macroeconomics, how to understand global situations and the economy, especially in the global sense, but also national and other economies as well. So today's motto is, if you don't learn from history, nothing will save you. And that is actually from a video I recently saw where a Romanian person was at, I guess, university, where he stood up and speak just a couple of words about his experience living under communism in Romania, and he was surprised that yeah, the university people were still rooting for that system. But anyway, so if you guys know the video, please link it. I'm not sure. I think there's just the YouTube algorithm pushed it to me and I watched it, but that was so good, at least that part, that I wanted to quote and actually name this video after that quote. So kudos for him for, talking about his experience. So in part 3, part 4, and part 5 of the hyperinflation interview, we talked again about a lot of things, but I tried to write out some basic ideas for us to talk about in this video. And the very first idea was that, as the Lebanese lira was losing value compared to the United States dollar, from the peg at $1,600, later to $2,000, then to $5,000, people still thought that it will just pass, it's transitory, it's something that will be fixed by the government soon enough, right? Because they held to the belief that things will go on how they have always been going. And that's so hard, that's so hard to break. But and that's why a lot of people got caught so badly because of it, because just by going from 1,600 to 2,000, that is a peg broken. But you think that, okay, it will stay at 2,000, maybe it will go back. Well, it went up to 2,200, right? 22,000, sorry, 22,000 eventually, and more, and then came back, and so on. So it's very hard. And I think that's the first lesson, is if you know something, if you know historically something, then try to fight your own bias towards the system that you're living in, because we all want to live in a continuation of the present, right? That we can expect what is going to happen tomorrow. So we all have that bias towards things will always remain like this, because this has been true for a long period of time. And it's hard to fight that. And that's the hardest things, I think, to fight in these situations. So that's something to learn, that if something comes up that is a clear sign and a trigger for you to do something, then start doing it. Maybe not go 100%, but start doing something, because if not, you're no better than the rest. Then why even know all this information if you don't have a trigger point and an action to follow it? Another trigger, another action. Just by talking about these things and using it as entertainment, it really doesn't help you, or it won't help you, right? Yeah, and then he mentions that this very simple choice of keeping your money at home would have actually flipped your whole economic class. Now, this is an interesting sentence. I think it's in the third video, around 10 minute. Yeah, I think 10 minute, where he talks about, what actually happened, and how just keeping cash outside of the banking system I guess as an answer of not trusting things will always keep on going like it is, would have actually changed your whole economic status, right? The economic class, going from very poor to very rich compared to your peers, right? And I want to express this or sit here a little bit because this is true in a deflationary situation. And I want to stress that Lebanon is actually having a dollar deflationary situation and a Lebanese pound hyperinflationary situation. But even before the hyperinflationary situation started, there was a deflation, as in less currency to go around when it comes to the Lebanese pound, right? Because it started with the riots and so on, but then the very first thing was that the banks shut their doors and they were closed for 2 weeks. And that means everyone who had their currency in the bank, whatever currency it was, it got stuck there. So that's a deflationary scenario. So first they suck your money out, and then whatever money is stuck in the bank, they inflate it away so it's purchaseless. But that initial state of sucking your money out or getting your money made the people who had cash on hand rich, and actually they had liquid assets to purchase other stuff, whereas someone whose money was stuck in the bank, they needed to sell stuff, right? And then you could pick stuff up on the cheap. But that didn't hold for long because eventually inflation. Now that gives us another point in history, right? What actually happened? Why did it start inflating? Well, it was the trust. The trust was lost, right? They didn't necessarily immediately print as much, or even if they did, it was okay because the trust was still there, right? And people were keeping it. That, I mean, how economic professors say is like the velocity of money, right? The velocity of money wasn't there because the trust was there. You didn't feel that you have to run and spend it, right? But once the trust is lost, then we go into hyperinflation. So I want to put that in, that yes, having a couple of months worth of cash savings outside of the banking system can make you, can be a good thing, but it by itself will not help you. Actually having a lot of cash when inflation hits is a bad thing, but not having enough cash when you really need it in a situation like this will force you to sell stuff away, right? And then he puts some numbers behind this. One is that the inflation of the currency, by inflation in this time he means that the purchasing power of the currency got higher 5 times, right? And then the product's price went up only 25 times. And I'm talking about the very initial period, not the hyperinflation that followed. So this means that if someone had cash outside of the banking system for that short period of time, that currency would have purchased you roughly 5 times more than it would have purchased you in regular times. But this has to be cash in hand instead of stock currency in the bank, right? So that was the case in Lebanon. Now that is also a bit tricky because they had two currency that they used. They had the Lebanese pound and the US dollar. So technically it's a different situation like in the US, where your own currency is the global reserve currency. So this doesn't necessarily translate one-to-one, but you can imagine if a cash deflationary shock happens, people who actually have cash on hand would be able to purchase some stuff from people who are suffering, right? And this became so heavy that it became a cultural phenomenon that, you actually becoming 5 times richer than you were became a sensitive issue that you should not flaunt your wealth or something like that. So it's quite interesting what happened. But this was also true in Romania. So it's not a shocker when the Romanian the Romanian government, the bank that was handling all the currency, we only had one bank, the CEC in Romania during communism. When hyperinflation happened, all the money was stuck there, right? Everything was in there. We got stuck for, I think, around 2 years or so. And then by that time, it was all inflated away. So, yeah, that happens to be true. Yeah, just before hyperinflation hits, because of the loss of faith in currency, there's usually a run for currency, a short run for currency, and people can use that. So, yeah. Now, of course, having too much cash outside or cash in hand could have its own actual problems, safety, but also how do you pay your mortgage online if all the cash is in your hand or something like that. So you have to make up your own mind what to do. And he also puts a liquidity problem. So yes, this is almost the textbook definition of a liquidity problem. And they still have a liquidity problem, but now with US dollars and gold. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But also we talked about stocks a little bit, if what would have happened if you would have bought stocks. Yes, it can go up in price, and it will go up in price at least to match inflation, or maybe even spike more. But if banks close and also a lot of other institutions close, then people want to cash out because they're afraid, so they can dump all the stocks to get out as soon as possible, even if it goes up, because it can go up tenfold on paper if inflation is going up 20-fold, or even if it 20-folds your stock. If you can't pull it out, what good does it make? Then they'll issue something like, yes, you'll be able to pull it out, we'll just keep it in this savings account for you for 2 years. I think that's what they did. Definitely in the banks. I'm not sure with stocks and different companies, but what good does it serve you, right? So you got to watch out for the liquidity problem, and you have to prepare for liquidity problems even before you prepare for hyperinflation. Yep. Yes, we talked about real estate a little bit, and then so regarding real estate, it was a similar situation. That real estate actually went down in price first, before it started going up in price. But just because it's going up in price, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's holding the inflation adjusted price. It actually could be still losing value. It's going up in price, but not as much as, let's say, the US dollars as foreign currency is going up in Lebanon. And I mean, we have to make short versions and long versions of these videos because it's just a lot to unpack. So I think the easiest one is to unpack things in lives. So I'll do more live, but you have to attend the live videos, and then I'll have because my live videos tend to run long, so I can expand on those, right? But just short about real estate was that the situation was that the government gave a period where the builders could pay off their taxes or loans or that sort of stuff towards banks, or banks gave this where they could still pay it off in Lebanese lira. So they actually wanted Lebanese lira or US currency, US dollars that was stuck in the system for 2 years or so. That's what they told them so far. Who knows how long it will be there. So anyway, they actually wanted this stuck currency in the bank. So people who were thinking that, hey, real estate is a good investment, they could use their stuck currency in the bank to exchange it for real estate. But also he tends to talk about a friend where a friend bought a car during this initial period of deflation, I should say, for like 10,000 US dollars, like a latest model. I don't even know what the car was, rank. Yeah. But anyway, so yes, people who wanted to get rid of some stuff and needed cash, they got rid of it. And also he was able to pick up an apartment for 30,000 US dollars. Now Lebanese apartments, I checked even before and after what happened there, they're not cheap. So they were roughly Western European prices. So they're quite up there, especially in Beirut, even today. It's not like you're getting a really good deal. But anyway, for $30,000, that was a really good deal for him because the crunch in this time was on the builders. But as soon as they paid off their debt and actually washed their hands somewhat, then they stopped building. And I told you this in previous videos that hyperinflation stops businesses. That's why a lot of businesses fail and their stocks fail. Because they stop doing business because the environment is so hostile, just because the currency how it's boiling up. They cannot no longer do business, from shortages to everything else, and we'll talk about that in a future video. So now came the housing shortage or so, because the builders stopped building, and then prices started going up. But he didn't say this, but I'm telling you, just because prices are going up, they might not be actually going up with enough rate or enough speed to cover inflation. But it's still better than cash, even in Lebanon, especially still better than currency held at the bank. That was the worst, right? So yeah. Then we talk a little bit of gold. Right, and he says like how that's a traditional way, and a lot of Arab countries know that, and they have been holding gold. However, it was never really a cool thing to do, because it was always some knowledge passed down from parents or grandparents. Hey, if you don't know what to do, just buy gold, just buy gold. So actually younger people, my observation is probably they didn't do it. Precisely because of that, because they wanted something else, right? However, it did, of course, it did hold its value. Even today, if you want to sell or buy gold in Lebanon, they will ask you for the US dollar price, right? In US dollars, and you would be having a hard time buying gold with Lebanese currency. That's depreciating. So basically it held its value. Now I would think that it has, like, he probably doesn't have too much experience selling or buying gold during this time. Neither did we in Romania. During that time we were very poor. So, but I can tell you that it has its own fluctuations, just because of how much need there is locally, and the local price will be somewhere around the international price just now, because we live in a more globalized economy. But the local price will have fluctuations, and back in 90s those fluctuations were huge, because yeah, we were behind the iron curtain, then just opening up, so we didn't have too much access to Western markets. But yeah, so it kept its value, and people actually had to liquidate though. And at this very first period, where they went into this liquidity crisis, where people didn't have cash and the whole banking system was locked up, people had to sell their gold. So there you go. That is what you want to avoid, gold and silver, people. You want to make sure that you don't have to sell your gold, or you are forced into selling it. So that is the big exclamation mark here, that people were forced to sell their gold when they did not have enough cash, because the bank was closed. Okay. And then of course later on gold kept its purchasing power with everything else falling, like currencies and such. However, not for the people who had to sell it. Yep. Yeah, and we can talk more about gold. We didn't talk too much during the interview about gold, but they never went into full-blown bartering in gold and silver, because he says that it has a liquidity or liquidation problem, because people still want to spend Lebanese liras, and that is because Lebanese liras is losing its purchasing power. So why wouldn't you want to spend that instead of spending something else? So it makes sense that they want to liquidate if they want to sell it based on today's price, right? Because maybe tomorrow it will be more, gold will be more in Lebanese liras. So you have a piece of gold, right? And then you're holding on to it until the last day when you actually need to spend it. But at that point, you're exchanging it and then spending only some parts of it, right? So it's a bit hard just because of different denominations, and a lot of people still don't have knowledge or I guess experience in dealing with gold. But this also tells me something else that we're not talked about, but I can tell you from my experience that that means that people still believe in the Lebanese currency, right? They still believe that things will go back to normal, right? And that is why they still have the idea that hey, I need to liquidate, and how will I liquidate gold? Once that feeling was given up by people, once they go into full depression mode in their head, then they don't ever want to liquidate. They just directly trade with gold. As long as the country is rich enough to have that. Romania was not that case. Gold was outlawed. However, some African countries did that, right? Especially the ones that still have gold mines and so on. So they are not trading in gold because people still have faith in the currency. And I have confirmation on this later in the interview, where he says that whenever the USO, imagine US dollars in Lebanese liras is going up, 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 and then there are big sharp drops. And one of these sharp drops means for a lot of people, okay, hyperinflation is over, let's go sell our dollars now before it loses its value, so we get back into Lebanese pounds, and we get this huge wealth that we acquired by just holding on to US dollars instead of Lebanese currency. So most likely that's their bet, whoever is holding gold, right? So that means that people are still just waiting for that clear sign from the government that this is over, and we can go back to normal. And that was the case with Romania as well. And I talked about in one of my latest interviews with a gentleman from Argentina, we talked about, in the US there was a case where somebody was making a video about handing out a chocolate bar or a silver bar, and how many people took the chocolate bar. And both were free, but you had to choose, right? And people chose the chocolate bar instead of the 10-ounce silver bar or something like that. That means that people don't know, right, the value of silver and gold. And even in these situations, they are reluctant to learn. So that's that. But once they know, if hyperinflation goes on for maybe 5 years or so like that, then people will know, but by that time it's too late, right? Then people were asking Ali, hey, is it gold like cheap or high in price? Or is it like good for foreign investors to go in and buy gold? And he said it doesn't really matter, it has its international price and you're not getting it cheaper or more expensive. You just have to pay what it is. And the frustration against gold was that you cannot buy it for cheap, right? Right, and on these sharp drops where the US dollar it goes up, or gold or anything else goes up in price, and then there's a sharp drop, especially in the price of US dollars. These are actually, he says, generated by the banking system, the government, and the currency exchangers or traders, merchants, whatever you want to call them, to actually suck in the dollars that is still left in the populace's hand, because the country or the banking system is experiencing a dollar shortage. So they want to use these tricky opportunities to suck in these dollars, and it is working because people are lining up to sell their dollars and gold and so on. And of course, after that initial period, it goes straight up again. And the confirmation for that is that the merchant or the trader who is actually buying your US dollars, they would never sell it to you, even during these drops. Well, we don't have enough, there's nothing to sell, but they take it gladly from you, right? Or maybe in our case in Romania, they would sell it, but the margin between the two price differences would be so big that you would not want to buy unless you were very desperate. All right. Yeah. These fake dips in prices. Yep. Yeah, and I also asked him about subsidies and so on, and he does tell us what we also know, is that it just creates shortages. So subsidies and price caps put on goods just make shortages and lives worse. And you know, that's what it is. And do I need to go in why? I don't think I need to. We should all understand that, but maybe in a live video we can talk about how exactly subsidies actually don't really help the regular people. Right, and one of the worst thing is actually the shortages in medicine and those type of things, right? So whoever has chronic illnesses or something like that and doesn't have enough medicine stocked up, then they are in a very tough situation, right? Yeah, and we talk about if he would be able, that at the time travel question, I like to ask this. I wish somebody else would ask me that question. If I could time travel back to Romania in the 90s, right? What would I tell myself, my very young self, or my parents, I guess. Anyway, so he would have just kept his money more diversified, would have kept his money outside of the banking system as much as possible. Definitely not cash in the banking system, I guess. Right, and then he tells us that also the energy shortage or the power outages is one of the worst parts ever. So investing in solar or other energy, and I think he kind of convinced me that I need to put more into solar. We're not so self-sufficient in solar yet. And I thought, well, it wouldn't, yeah, just because the power grid was still up in Romania to the point where civil war didn't happen. I thought that, you know, usually governments want to keep the power on, but it looks like not every government is doing their best. So maybe having more self-sufficient power source, you know. And I thought, well, yes, generators and such is good enough to run the fridges, but looks like a longer term solution is needed. All right. Yeah, and then we talk about cheap products and causing other health issues. So it's a spiral. Hyperinflation is really a spiral. Once you lost the purchasing power of the money, things that you don't even think about right now start popping up and causing trouble. Not even talking about shortages, but the clear example that he says, just because the country's purchasing power is lost, now they are importing very cheap, beauty products, for instance, that is causing skin problem in, the cheap makeups that they are importing from bad countries, I guess, is making the women's face have issues, right? I don't even want to go there, but one of the biggest things was actually bad produce, bad food being consumed, and a lot of stomach problems, and a lot of from the comment section, many people have asked like, oh, pain medicine and that, and yes, that's good, that's good to have. But actually back in Romania, like medicine for stomach illnesses and food poisoning was actually much more in need. So yeah, when a country suffers and they don't have enough food, people tend to eat what they can find, and yeah, or just food being in a freezer, but there's no more electricity, or yeah. And people sell these products. Back in Romania, I know cases where people were selling sausages, but the sausage was already gone bad. But then they would have these tricks of washing it down with, washing the sausage with, what's it? Vinegar. I don't know why vinegar didn't come into my mind. So anyway, yeah, that was horrible though. Yeah, and unsuspecting families would buy it and then become sick. I know. God, my family had, and even though we grew potatoes, but I mean, you have to buy some stuff, and you think that it's good, but it's not, and then people eat it, and yeah, horrible stuff. Yep. And learn to live in a crisis. I think that's the final takeaway. Learn to live in a crisis when you're in a crisis. It will be very different. My family knew, and we know, that when you're in a crisis, you have to live very differently. And I think we are in a crisis. I think you already should be living like you're in a crisis. And let's talk about that in a future live video. Yeah, but also talk about some money-making opportunities. I mean, all of these are just events, right? And then what you make of an event becomes your experience. An event is not your experience. What you make of it is your experience. So all of these points, we could point how you could have profited or gained value, or help your neighbor, or so many other points that we could point to and say, if you would have this prepared, this done, this is how you could have come in. But nothing helps if you don't learn from history. Nothing will save you. So let's all learn from history. Let's all have some more videos and more conversations, and be sure to share the video with your friends and family, and also hit that like button. Thank you very much.